Okay, so have you guys seen this whole thing with Meta shaking things up on Instagram?
Yeah.
Adding new parental controls for teens under 16.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see it play out.
It's gotten pretty heated, honestly. Especially over on tweakers.net. They're like, the Dutch version of CNET or something like that.
I see.
Anyway, there's a whole debate raging there with parents, techies, even some teenagers themselves chiming in with their 2 cents.
And it's such a relevant topic, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it speaks to this larger anxiety we have as a society about how social media is impacting young people.
For sure. And how do we find that balance? Trying to protect kids, but also giving them the freedom to, figure out the online world.
It's that classic dilemma, isn't it? Protection versus autonomy.
Mm.
It's tough.
No easy answers. But I think it'll be helpful to, lay it all out there, see what's actually changing, what people are saying about it.
Definitely. Get into those different perspectives.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, we can unpack some of the bigger questions this all brings up because, it's not just about Instagram, right?
Right. This is about the future of online spaces for young people. It's a much bigger picture.
100%. So let's start with the basics. Meta's making some big changes. What are they actually doing to Instagram for users under 16?
Well, they're really clamping down on a lot of things. Teen accounts, they'll be defaulting to private. Contact's going to be limited friends and followers only. And they're going all in on content filtering. Like the strictest level possible will be switched on automatically.
Wow, okay. So it sounds like, from what you're saying, Meta's not messing around.
It's a pretty big shift from where things were before. I mean, some of these features existed,
Right.
but they were opt-in.
Yeah.
Now it's like they're saying, okay, we see this isn't really working. Time to make some harder calls.
It almost feels like, what is it they say at amusement parks? Like, you must be this tall to ride,
Right.
except you must be this age to have more freedom.
Yeah. I like that analogy.
Mhm.
They're basically acknowledging that just having the sign up wasn't enough. Now they're stepping in and actually enforcing the height requirement.
It makes sense, though. You'd think they'd be feeling the pressure, right? With all the talk about social media and, mental health, screen time, all that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, social media companies have been under a microscope lately, especially when it comes to their youngest users. There's just been so much scrutiny and research about the impact of all this.
Right. It's a hot topic for sure. And I feel like this move from Meta, making these stricter settings basically unavoidable, it's definitely them responding to all that.
Yeah, I'd say it's a very calculated response.
But even with the best of intentions, how do you even begin to enforce something like this? It's the internet, right? People find loopholes.
Good point. And this is where it gets really interesting on a technical level. Meta's talking about using things like video selfies, even AI for age verification.
Wait, really? So they're going to have teenagers like whipping out their driver's licenses to prove their age every time they log on?
It'll be interesting to see exactly how they implement it. But yeah, it raises some big questions about how these technologies actually work, and more importantly, how that data gets used. But maybe
Yeah.
we can save that juicy bit for later.
Ooh, I love a good cliffhanger. Okay, but before we get too deep into the whole AI rabbit hole, let's bring it back to what real people are saying about all of this. Because trust me, over on Tweakers, the comment section is on fire with opinions. So, scrolling through all these comments, it's clear that people have strong opinions about this stuff, parents especially. It's like this whole thing hits a nerve.
Oh, absolutely. It's tapping into some really fundamental anxieties about parenting in the digital age.
Totally. And one of the first comments that caught my eye was from someone with the username Patricos, and they were basically like, it's about time.
Interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't like they were praising Meta or anything. More like they were just acknowledging the reality of it. Like kids are already on social media, so whether we like it or not, having some guardrails in place is better than nothing.
Right. It's that sense of, okay, the train has left the station, but maybe we can at least make sure it's running on the right tracks.
Exactly. And it made me think of those parents who, like, tried to hold out on getting their kids smartphones for as long as possible, but then they finally caved because it was just too hard to, keep up with everyone else.
Yeah, it feels like a losing battle sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah,
This idea that you could just keep technology at bay, it's everywhere.
totally. And speaking of different approaches, there's this whole other thread going on about that classic parenting debate, the whole teach, don't ban philosophy.
Ah, yes, I saw that one. It got pretty lively.
Yeah. So Frame 164 kind of kicked it off, and they made this analogy like this is like banning climbing frames just because kids might fall. Their point was that kids need to learn how to navigate the online world just like they learn to navigate, the physical world.
And it's a valid point. I mean, We don't bubble wrap our kids,
Yeah.
right? We teach them how to cross the street safely, how to be aware of their surroundings.
Okay, so then how do we translate that to the digital world? Is there like a digital street smarts guide we can give our kids?
I think that's exactly what we need to be figuring out. How to teach them critical thinking skills, media literacy, how to question what they see online, to be aware of potential risks.
To know that not everything is as it seems on Instagram.
Exactly. And just as importantly, to feel comfortable coming to us, to a trusted adult, if they encounter something that makes them uncomfortable.
Which is, let's be real, easier said than done sometimes. Especially when you've got these algorithms that are literally designed to keep them hooked, you know?
Right, and that's where the analogy to the climbing frame starts to break down a bit.
Yeah.
Because a climbing frame isn't targeting your kid with personalized content that's designed to exploit their interests and keep them scrolling for hours.
Totally. And some of the tweakers users, they picked up on that too. Like Robbie Root 4 made the point that unlike a climbing frame, social media is engineered to be as addictive as possible.
Oh, they're not wrong.
And then Zatar and Anel took it even further. They said that being on Instagram is more like climbing the Eiffel Tower with NO safety net. A little dramatic, maybe.
Uh-huh. Maybe Tad. But it does get at that fear that a lot of parents feel, right? That sense of, oh my gosh, what are my kids getting into?
For sure. It can feel like they're navigating a world that's way more complex, way more potentially dangerous than anything we ever had to deal with at that age.
Right. And it makes you question, as a parent, are we doing enough to prepare them?
Exactly. It's a heavy question. And, looking at the comments, it's clear that there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Everyone's trying to figure it out as they go.
Yeah, every family's got to find what works for them.
For sure. And some parents are really trying to hold the line, Like OrBLM SSRL shared that their approach is basically WhatsApp only, no social media until high school.
Wow, that's a tough stance.
Yeah, and they even admitted that they're not sure how long it'll last. But I give them credit for trying.
I do too. It shows a real commitment to, like, setting boundaries and being intentional about their kids' relationship with technology.
Totally. But then, you've got comments like the one from Gohan040, who's like, come on, we were all young once. Forbidding something rarely works in the long run.
And there's truth to that. Kids are going to be curious. They're going to find ways to push the boundaries.
It's that classic forbidden fruit thing.
Exactly.
And Gohan04 even shared this funny anecdote about, like, how their parents told them not to soup up their scooter, and of course that's exactly what they did.
Kids will be kids.
Exactly. And it just goes to show you can implement all the restrictions in the world, but ultimately you can't control everything.
And that goes for parents and for Meta, right? I mean, they can try to make Instagram as safe as possible. But kids are tech savvy. They'll find workarounds. They'll figure out ways to access what they're curious about.
It's like that saying, water always finds a way.
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, is Meta fighting a losing battle here? Or maybe, just maybe, the focus should be less about restrictions and more about empowerment.
What do you mean?
Like, instead of just trying to keep kids off these platforms entirely, maybe we need to focus on giving them the tools and the knowledge to navigate them safely and responsibly.
So equipping them to handle the digital world, not just sheltering them from it.
Exactly. And that's where the conversation gets even more interesting, because it's not just about the kids anymore. It's about the platforms themselves, the role technology plays in our lives, and some pretty big societal questions that this whole debate brings up.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. I love getting philosophical. Tell me more.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the parental anxieties, the tech challenges, but what about the bigger societal stuff? Because some people over on Tweakers, they were bringing up this very Dutch concept of betuttling.
Ah, yes.
Which for anyone who's not fluent in Dutch, it's like, how do you even explain that?
It's tricky. It doesn't translate well, but it's that idea of when protection tips over into being like overbearing, overly controlling.
Right, like nanny state vibes, but with a bit more, I don't know.
A dash of judgment.
Exactly. So some people are wondering if Meta's new rules, are they going too far?
Yeah, it's a fair question. And, it's something we're wrestling with in so many areas of life these days, right? Not just online.
For sure. What comes to mind for me is like, seatbelt laws, They're there to keep us safe, but some people see it as like, come on, it should be my choice.
Exactly. That tension between individual freedom and what's best for the collective. We see it with helmet laws, with all sorts of things.
Totally. And it sounds like with these Instagram changes, Meta's kind of stuck in the middle of that whole debate.
Yeah, they are. And I saw this one comment that really sums it up. It was Cariola 23, and they said, are seatbelts just Betuttling or are they life-saving? And it's such a good question.
Right. Like, when does protecting people become, I don't know, a little too much?
Exactly. And who gets to decide that? It's something we all need to be thinking about more, especially in this digital age where those lines are getting blurrier than ever.
No kidding. And speaking of blurry lines, let's talk about this whole age verification thing. I mean, how can Meta even know for sure who's under 16? Are we going to have teenagers uploading driver's license selfies now?
Huh. Well, I hope it doesn't come to that. But you've hit on a really, really tricky part of all of this. Age verification online, it's notoriously difficult.
Right. It's not like there's some magical system,
Not
right?
yet, at least. Meta's talking about using video selfies, AI, all that stuff.
Hmm.
But even with the fanciest tech, there are going to be gaps, inaccuracies.
Oh, for sure. Like teenagers are the masters of figuring out workarounds for this kind of thing.
Exactly. And sometimes even well-intentioned systems can backfire. There was a comment from Enionis who was saying their son actually got stuck with a restricted account.
Wait, seriously, how did that even happen?
So apparently, he was trying to verify his age for a VR headset. Totally legit, right? But something went wrong with the system, and boom, restricted account.
Oh, no. So he got penalized for actually following the rules. That's rough.
And it just goes to show these systems, even with the best intentions, they can have these unintended consequences.
Totally. And it makes you think, are we sometimes creating more problems by trying to solve others?
It's a constant risk with technology.
Yeah.
We're trying to find solutions,
Right.
but it's this moving target.
Totally. And speaking of moving targets, we can't ignore the elephant in the room here, data privacy.
Yeah, that's the big one, isn't it? And the tweakers community, they picked up on that right away.
What were they saying?
Well, Bullion made a really good point about this company, Yoti, that Meta's using for age verification. It's a third-party AI company. So essentially, you're handing over your face, and therefore, your implied age, to another company.
Okay, and that's not sitting well with people.
Rightfully so. I mean, we already have all these anxieties about how much data these tech giants are collecting, right?
Totally. Like, where's it all going? Who has access to it? It's kind of creepy when you stop and think about it.
Exactly. So then you add in this whole other layer with facial recognition, and it's no wonder people are freaking out a bit.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, even if Meta's heart is in the right place, even if they're trying to protect kids, this whole thing just opens up this whole other Pandora's box of data privacy issues.
Exactly. And it feeds into this bigger picture of what we call surveillance capitalism,
Yeah.
where we're constantly being tracked, analyzed, categorized, all based on our online behavior. And it's not always clear what that data is being used for or who has access to it.
Man, that's a lot to unpack. And honestly, it feels like with this whole Instagram thing, there are no easy answers.
I agree. It's messy, it's complicated,
Yeah.
but that's why it's so important to be talking about it.
100%. So, to everyone listening, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on all of this? Meta's changes, this idea of betuttling, the whole data privacy nightmare.
It's a conversation that goes way beyond just Instagram or even social media.
Absolutely. This is about how we as a society want to navigate this whole digital world that's constantly evolving. Share your thoughts, keep the conversation going. You can find us on all the usual platforms, and we'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, stay curious.
And stay mindful of your digital footprint.